For 6 years, a grandmother worked 3 jobs to pay for the surgeries that would let her deaf grandson hear. She mopped floors, washed dishes, took every shift and never gave up. Then a private jet landed on the runway and a man in a custom suit stepped out. He wasn't a doctor. He wasn't a donor. He was the father who had abandoned them, and he was about to reclaim the son she had saved. Her name is Ruthie Mee Coleman. The boy she raised is Marcus. Born profoundly deaf, his cochlear implants cost a fortune. She gave 6 years and 3 jobs to save him. Now, as the man she once called her son steps onto the tarmac, one question remains. After all she sacrificed, will she lose the boy she saved? Marcus was born on a humid August night in Baton Rouge, Louisiana. His mother had died in childbirth, and his father, Andre, Ruthie Mee's only son, held the baby for exactly 4 minutes before he walked out of the hospital. He left behind a tiny boy who couldn't hear a single sound. The doctors called it profound bilateral sensorineural hearing loss. In plain language, Marcus was deaf. The world came to him in vibrations, not voices. When he cried, he couldn't hear himself. When Ruthie Mee sang to him, he felt her chest hum, but never knew the melody. He needed cochlear implants, surgically placed devices that bypass the damaged parts of the inner ear and send signals directly to the auditory nerve. Without them, he would never hear speech, never learn to talk the way hearing children do, and his window for brain development was closing fast. The implant surgery, device, follow-up mapping sessions, and years of speech therapy would cost upwards of $150,000. Andre had vanished, leaving no forwarding address and no financial support. So Ruthie Mee did what she'd always done. She got to work. She was 61 years old. She took a job mopping floors at the East Baton Rouge Parish School Board, another job washing dishes at a diner called Mama's Kitchen, and a third job as a home health aide on weekends. 7 days a week, she clocked in. The money went into a separate savings account she called the Marcus Fund. Every penny she earned after rent and beans and rice was for his ears. It took her 6 years, 6 years of cracked hands and aching knees, 6 years of walking home at midnight because the bus had stopped running and she couldn't spare the fare. 6 years of telling Marcus, "Soon, baby, soon you'll hear the birds. You'll hear me say your name." When Marcus was 2, she got him fitted for his first implant. The surgery alone was $45,000. Ruthie Mee handed over a cashier's check and felt no regret, only a ferocious joy. The activation day came on a Tuesday. The audiologist placed the external processor on Marcus's tiny head, switched it on, and the boy's eyes went wide. He heard his grandmother's voice for the first time. Her scratchy, worn-out, exhausted voice saying, "I love you, Marcus." He didn't understand the words yet, but he turned toward her face and smiled, and Ruthie Mee collapsed into a chair and sobbed. Over the next 4 years, she paid for the second implant, 2 revisions, 3 mapping adjustments, and learning support. She created a home where sound became a miracle. Marcus learned to speak. He learned to listen. He started school on grade level, and through all of it, Andre never called. Not a letter, not a birthday card, not a single dollar. But Ruthie Mee kept a photograph of him on the mantelpiece, not out of hope, but out of a silent prayer that one day he would come home and see what his mother had built from the wreckage he left behind. She never imagined he'd return in a private jet. 2 days ago, the jet landed at Baton Rouge Metropolitan Airport. Andre Coleman stepped out wearing a suit that cost more than Ruthie Mee earned in a year. He had built a trucking logistics empire in Texas, and now he was back, not to apologize, but to claim the son he'd abandoned. He had the law on his side. Without formal adoption or guardianship papers, Ruthie Mee had no legal standing. Marcus was still Andre's son, and as the man walked across the tarmac toward the grandmother and the boy she'd saved, one thing was terrifyingly clear. After all those years of sacrifice, she might lose everything. The moment Andre's polished shoes touched the tarmac, Ruthie Mee felt her knees go weak. He looked nothing like the boy she'd raised. That boy wore hand-me-down sneakers and a perpetually worried frown. This man wore a charcoal Brioni suit and an expression of absolute certainty. He walked toward her as if the last 6 years had been a minor delay in his schedule. 2 men flanked him, a lawyer and a driver, and the lawyer was holding a manila envelope. Marcus, now 9 years old, pressed closer to his grandmother's side. He could hear Andre's footsteps now, the implants Ruthie Mee had paid for with her ruined joints picking up the crunch of tarmac under leather soles. He looked up at her, confused. "Who is that, Grandma?" Ruthie Mee did not answer because she could not find the words. This was the son who had held his own baby for 4 minutes and then vanished. This was the man she had prayed would walk through her door with a change of heart and a bouquet of apologies. But the face coming toward her carried no apology. It carried entitlement. Andre stopped 3 feet away. He did not hug his mother. He did not even look at her for more than a second. His eyes locked onto Marcus. "Hey, little man, I'm your father. I've come to take you home." The words landed like a physical blow. Ruthie Mee stepped in front of Marcus, her body trembling but her voice steel. "You don't have a home to take him to. You walked out before his first bath. You have no right." Andre's lawyer opened the envelope. He handed Ruthie Mee a sheaf of papers, a petition for custody, filed that very morning in the 19th Judicial District Court. The document claimed that Ruthie Mee Coleman, a 67-year-old woman with no legal guardianship, was unsuitable to raise a minor child. It cited her age, her 3 jobs, her modest income. It painted her as a well-meaning but incapable old woman who had merely been keeping the seat warm for the boy's biological father, the same father who had not sent a single birthday present, the same father who had left Marcus and his dead mother without so much as a backward glance. And yet legally he was right. Without formal adoption papers, Ruthie Mee had no parental rights. She was a caretaker. She was a placeholder. She was, in the eyes of the law, nothing. But here's the thing the legal papers didn't capture. They didn't mention the night Marcus spiked a fever of 104 after his first implant surgery, and Ruthie Mee sat upright in a hospital chair for 36 hours, sponging his forehead with a cloth she'd wet in the bathroom sink. They didn't show the receipts she kept in a shoebox under her bed, thousands of dollars paid in cash for speech therapy sessions she drove Marcus to every Thursday at 6 in the morning before her first shift. They didn't record the sound of her voice at 2 a.m. when Marcus had nightmares because the implant processing made the world too loud, and she whispered stories about her own grandmother who had been born into slavery and lived free, and how resilience was a Coleman family inheritance. Those things were invisible to the court, and Andre knew it. He had built his trucking company by understanding exactly what the law allowed and what it didn't, and he was betting that an elderly black grandmother with no legal standing and no money for a high-powered attorney would fold. But what Andre didn't know is that Ruthie Mee had been fighting impossible battles since the day she was born. She'd fought segregation in the lunch counters of Baton Rouge as a teenager. She fought a landlord who tried to evict her and her 3 siblings after her father died of a stroke in a cotton field. She fought poverty and grief and a world that told her she was invisible. And she'd fought for this boy, this beautiful, smiling, sound-hearing boy, with every aching hour of her body's labor. She wasn't about to stop now. She took the papers from the lawyer's hand, looked straight at her son, and said one sentence. "You are going to have to explain to that boy why you left his mother to die alone." Then she turned, took Marcus's hand, and walked toward the parking lot. Andre's face flickered. Just for a fraction of a second, a crack appeared in that billionaire armor. It wasn't guilt. It was something older, something buried. And that crack, small as it was, would become the chasm that swallowed everything. Now, Andre hadn't always been this way. To understand why a father would abandon his own child and return years later with a private jet and a custody suit, you have to understand what happened to Andre Coleman when he was 17. He was a senior in high school, a bright kid with a scholarship offer to Southern University, when Ruthie Mee's husband, his father, walked out. Not with a private jet, not with a fortune, but with a brown suitcase and a lie about coming back. He never did. Ruthie Mee worked double shifts at a commercial laundry to keep the lights on. And Andre, he internalized the lesson that fathers leave. That's what fathers do. They leave, and then one day they come back with money and power and expect the door to be open. He had become the exact ghost he grew up hatting. But there was a darker layer to this story, one that Ruthie Mee herself didn't fully know until 3 days later, when she received a phone call from a woman named Valerie, a former caseworker at Texas Child Protective Services. Valerie had seen Andre's custody filing, and she was calling to tell Ruthie Mee something that would change everything. Andre had another child, a daughter 4 years older than Marcus, born to a different mother in Dallas. He had abandoned that child too, and the mother had died in a car accident 6 months ago. That daughter, a girl named Jasmine, was now in foster care, bouncing between group homes, and Andre had never once claimed her. He hadn't come to Baton Rouge because he wanted to be a father. He'd come because Marcus, a healthy male heir with no maternal family to contest custody, could be useful to him. The trucking company, Coleman Logistics, was facing a hostile takeover. Andre needed to present a stable family image to the board of investors, a father reclaiming his son, a redemption story, the private jet, the tailored suit, the tearful reunion. It was a performance, and the real child he could have saved, a girl with his eyes and his stubborn chin, was sitting in a foster home 300 miles away while he played doting dad for the cameras. Ruthie Mee hung up the phone and sat in silence for 20 minutes. She had been prepared to fight a selfish man who wanted his son back out of some twisted late-blooming love. But this wasn't love. This was branding. This was public relations. This was a man so hollow that he could use his own child as a prop, while another one of his children slept on a stranger's couch. And then the most chilling thought of all crept into Ruthie Mee's mind. If Andre won custody, what would happen to Marcus after the photo ops, after the board meeting? After the investors were satisfied, she knew her son. The same man who walked out at 17 and never looked back would walk out again, and this time he'd leave Marcus not in a grandmother's arms, but in some boarding school, some chain of paid caretakers who wouldn't know about the nightmares or the speech therapy or the songs she hummed while she braided his hair. The boy who had just learned to hear would be silenced again, not by deafness, but by a world that treated him like a checkmark on a custody form. The legal battle that followed lasted 3 months, but the war was fought in the first week. Andre's legal team moved fast. They got a temporary custody order giving Andre visitation rights, supervised at first, then unsupervised. Ruthie Mee watched a stranger in an expensive watch take her grandson to a hotel suite for the weekend. She stood at her living room window, the same window she'd looked out of every morning for 6 years while she prayed for the boy's future, and she felt helpless in a way she'd never allowed herself to feel before. But then something happened that Andre's perfectly orchestrated plan didn't account for. Marcus started asking questions. At 9 years old, with a brain sharpened by years of compensatory visual learning, he had become deeply observant. He had seen the way his grandmother's hands trembled when Andre came to pick him up. He had heard the catch in her voice when she said, "Have fun with your daddy." He had felt the coldness of his father's hotel rooms, the way Andre offered him gadgets instead of affection, the way the man who claimed to be his father never once asked what his favorite color was or how he'd learned to say thank you with the implants that had cost a grandmother her retirement. And one Saturday evening, when Andre returned him to Ruthie Mee's house, Marcus didn't run inside. He stood on the porch, turned to Andre and said, in the clearest words his implants had ever helped him form, "You're not my dad. She's my mom and my dad and my everything. I'm not going back with you." Andre's face went blank, not with anger, but with the dawning recognition that the child he'd tried to claim as an asset was not a passive object, but a witness who could speak. A witness who could tell the court exactly what kind of father Andre was, and that right there is when the entire case turned. Because in Louisiana family court, a child over the age of 7 can express a preference, and while it's not binding, it carries enormous weight. Ruthie Mee had spent everything to give Marcus a voice. Now, that voice was about to speak for her, but the court date was 2 weeks away, and Andre had one more card to play. A card so cruel that even his own lawyer hesitated before filing it. He was going to argue that Ruthie Mee, a woman who had given her blood, her sleep, her body, and her entire life savings for this child, was an unfit guardian because she was too old and too poor. He was going to make her defend the very sacrifices she'd made, and in doing so, he would force her to reveal the truth that she had hidden from everyone. The 3 jobs had nearly killed her. She had a heart condition, diagnosed 6 months ago, that she'd been ignoring because there was no time and no money for a cardiologist. And if Andre's lawyers found out, they would use it to destroy her. The clock was ticking, and Ruthie Mee had one last chance to save Marcus. But to do it, she would have to do the thing she'd spent a lifetime refusing to do, ask for help. The first person Ruthie Mee called was a woman named Clarice Johnson. Clarice ran a small non-profit in North Baton Rouge called Grandfamilies United, an organization that helped grandparents who were raising their grandchildren navigate the legal system. Ruthie Mee had heard about her through a flyer at the community center, the kind of flyer she used to ignore because she had been taught since childhood that asking for help meant admitting weakness. But now she had no choice. She dialed the number on a Wednesday morning. Clarice answered on the second ring. 2 hours later, she was sitting at Ruthie Mee's kitchen table with a yellow legal pad and a look of focused determination. She listened to the whole story, the abandonment, the 3 jobs, the implants, the private jet, the custody suit, and when Ruthie Mee was finished, Clarice put her pen down and said something that shifted the entire axis of the fight. Ruthie, you are not just fighting Andre, you're fighting a system that was never designed to protect women like you. But that system has a flaw. It relies on paperwork, and you have something better, you have witnesses. What Clarice had identified was the single most powerful weapon in Ruthie Mee's arsenal, the community that had watched her sacrifice for 6 years. Dr. Elaine Vargas, Marcus's pediatric audiologist, had seen Ruthie Mee bring the boy to every single mapping appointment, never late, never missing. She had witnessed the way Marcus would reach for his grandmother's hand when the processors were activated, the way Ruthie Mee would mouth words slowly so he could learn to pair sounds with lip movements. Thomasina Lewis, the manager at Mama's Kitchen, had worked beside Ruthie Mee in that sweltering dish pit, and she remembered the Friday evenings when Ruthie Mee would take her cash tips, fold them into a worn envelope, and say, "That's another payment toward the implants." Cynthia, Marcus's kindergarten teacher, could testify how this so-called unsuitable grandmother had spent hours every night helping Marcus bridge the language gap that deafness had created, drilling vocabulary flashcards she'd made by hand from magazine cutouts. These people were not just character witnesses. They were proof of a life lived in consistent, relentless love. And Andre had no equivalent, no one who had seen him parent, because he never had. But Clarice knew that testimony alone might not be enough. Andre's lawyers were sharp, and they were already pivoting to a new strategy. If they couldn't paint Ruthie Mee as neglectful, they would paint her as terminal. They had somehow obtained a partial medical record, likely through a private investigator who'd talked to a billing clerk at the free clinic. The record showed that Ruthie Mee had been diagnosed with atrial fibrillation 6 months prior, a condition that caused irregular heartbeats and put her at elevated risk for stroke. She had not sought treatment because she couldn't afford the medication and couldn't miss work. The diagnosis was manageable with proper care, but Andre's lawyers were spinning it as a death sentence. Their motion argued that placing a child with a guardian who had an untreated heart condition was reckless endangerment. The same man who had exposed his son to zero danger because he had been absent was now claiming that the woman who'd carried that boy on her back for 6 years was a liability. The cruelty was breathtaking. But then the "it gets worse" moment arrived. Ruthie Mee received a letter from Andre's attorney notifying her that they intended to call Marcus himself as a witness. To force a 9-year-old boy to sit in a courtroom, in front of cameras and strangers, and answer questions about which family member he preferred. The psychological damage of such an interrogation could undo years of the very stability Ruthie Mee had fought to create. Clarice read the letter 3 times, and then she did something she rarely did. She got angry. He wants to put that boy on the stand because he knows the trauma might shut him down. If Marcus freezes, if he can't speak, Andre will twist that silence into proof that you've isolated him, that he's afraid of you. It was a brutal, calculated gambit, and it almost worked. The night before the hearing, Marcus had nightmares. He woke up screaming at 3 in the morning, his implants on the nightstand, his world suddenly silent again until Ruthie Mee rushed in and placed the processors on his head and said the words she always said, "I'm here, baby, I'm right here." He clung to her, shaking, and she knew then that she could not let them put her grandson on that stand. She would find another way, even if it cost her everything. The next morning, the hearing began in the East Baton Rouge Parish Courthouse. The room was small and beige and smelled of old carpet. Andre sat with his lawyers at one table, immaculate and unbothered. Ruthie Mee sat at the other with Clarice, who had marshaled a pro bono family law attorney named David Okonkwo, a young Nigerian-American lawyer who had a reputation for dismantling arrogant opponents. The judge, a stern black woman named Judge Harriet Fontenot, opened the session by stating she read the filings and was deeply concerned about the welfare of the child. For the first hour, Andre's team presented their case. They called in character witnesses who praised his business acumen. They submitted bank statements proving his financial ability to provide for Marcus. They painted a portrait of a successful man who had made mistakes in his youth, but was now ready to step into his God-given role as a father. Not once did they mention Jasmine. Not once did they mention the fact that another child of his was waiting in a foster home. That omission would become the crack that broke the dam. David Okonkwo cross-examined Andre for 45 minutes, and in that time he dismantled the billionaire's narrative piece by piece. He asked Andre how many times he had visited Marcus before filing for custody. 0. He asked Andre if he had attended any of Marcus's cochlear implant surgeries. No. He asked Andre if he could name Marcus's favorite food, his favorite book, the name of his audiologist, or the speech therapist who had taught him to say, "I love you." Andre's answers were flat, evasive, or non-existent. And then David asked the question that silenced the room. "Mr. Coleman, do you have any other children?" Andre hesitated. His lawyer objected. The judge overruled. Andre said no. And at that moment, David pulled out a certified copy of Jasmine Coleman's birth certificate, her mother's death certificate, and the records from the Texas foster care system showing that Andre had been contacted multiple times and had failed to respond. The courtroom went so quiet you could hear the fluorescent lights hum. Andre's face, for the second time in this story, cracked, not with shame, but with the realization that he had been outmaneuvered on his own turf. Judge Fontenot looked at Andre over her glasses, and her voice was cold as winter. "You lied under oath about the existence of another child, a girl who needs a parent just as much as Marcus does, and you expect this court to believe you are suddenly ready to be a father." But it was the next witness who truly turned the tide. Not a lawyer, not a doctor, not a teacher. It was Marcus. He had asked to speak. David had prepared a careful, age-appropriate set of questions, but Marcus didn't need them. He sat in the witness chair, his small feet dangling above the floor, and he looked directly at the judge. His voice, processed through implants that cost more than a house and paid for with his grandmother's bones, filled the room with a clarity that no adult could match. "I want to stay with my grandma. She's the one who taught me to hear. She's the one who taught me that when people leave, you don't have to be like them. You can stay," and she stayed. Judge Fontenot removed her glasses. She was not a woman who cried easily, but there was a glisten in her eyes. She called a recess. When she returned, she had made her decision. She denied Andre's custody petition in its entirety. She granted Ruthie Me permanent legal guardianship. She ordered Andre to pay retroactive child support in the amount of $240,000, the estimated cost of the medical care Ruthie Me had funded, and she directed the court clerk to forward all evidence of Andre's perjury regarding Jasmine to the district attorney's office. Andre Coleman left that courtroom not as a conquering father, but as a man facing potential criminal charges and a reputation in tatters. His investors pulled out. His board called an emergency meeting. The private jet was gone within the week, but the story didn't end there, because the judge's ruling left one life still hanging in the balance. Jasmine, the girl Andre had abandoned, was still in foster care, still without a family, still invisible. And Ruthie Me, sitting in that courtroom, felt something shift inside her chest. She had just won the battle for Marcus, but she could not celebrate while another child, a child who shared her grandson's blood, was alone. She looked at Clarice. She looked at David, and then she spoke the words that would launch the final chapter of this journey. "I want to bring her home." Ruthie Me's words hung in the air like a promise she had just made to God. Clarice looked at her, then at David, and nodded. They filed the emergency kinship placement petition that same afternoon. The hearing was set for the following week. In the meantime, Ruthie Me and Marcus drove to Dallas. They met Jasmine at a group home on the south side of the city. She was a shy 8-year-old with her father's stubborn chin and her grandmother's deep brown eyes. She had been moved 4 times in 6 months. She didn't trust adults. She didn't believe in permanence. But when Ruthie Me knelt down in front of her and said, "I'm your grandmother and I came to bring you home," something cracked open in Jasmine's chest. Not all the way. Trust, once shattered, does not heal in a single sentence, but enough for her to take Ruthie Me's hand. Enough for Marcus, standing behind his grandmother with the hearing implants that had cost her everything, to smile at his half-sister and say, "She's the one who stays." The placement was approved in record time. Judge Fontenot, already familiar with the Coleman case, signed the order herself. The same court that had stripped Andre of his custody rights now gave Ruthie Me legal guardianship of a second grandchild. The legal term is kinship care, and across this country, more than 2.5 million children are being raised by grandparents or other relatives. Most of them, like Jasmine, have no one else. And most of them, like Ruthie Me, are invisible. But not anymore. Because when the local news got wind of what had happened, a grandmother who mopped floors and washed dishes to save a deaf boy, then fought down a billionaire in court, then brought home a forgotten daughter, the story caught fire. A reporter from the Baton Rouge Advocate interviewed Clarice and Ruthie Me. A national morning show picked it up. Donations poured into Grandfamilies United, enough to expand their legal aid clinic. A philanthropist in New Orleans, moved by the coverage, funded Ruthie Mee's cardiac treatment so she could finally see a cardiologist without fear of bankruptcy. The atrial fibrillation that Andre's lawyers had tried to weaponize turned out to be manageable with medication and rest. The same rest Ruthie Mee had denied herself for 6 years became, for the first time, a doctor's order. Andre Coleman's empire did not survive the month. The perjury referral led to an indictment. A deeper investigation uncovered financial irregularities at Coleman Logistics that had been papered over with the very image of family stability Andre had tried to manufacture. The board ousted him. The private jet, that gleaming white monument to his ambition, was repossessed by creditors. He was sentenced to 18 months for perjury and fraud to be served at a federal facility in Oakdale. He sent one letter from prison addressed to Ruthie Mee. She read it alone at her kitchen table. In it, he did not ask for forgiveness. He simply wrote, "You were a better father to me than I ever was to my children. I should have been you." She folded the letter and placed it inside the shoebox of receipts, the one that held every dollar she'd spent on Marcus's implants. She didn't need his apology. She had already won. But the most surprising detail was this. When Jasmine arrived at Ruthie Mee's house, she failed her school hearing screening. A mild loss in the mid-frequencies, probably present since birth, never diagnosed in the chaos of foster care. It was the same type of loss that, untreated, could have led to speech delays and academic struggles. Ruthie Mee recognized the signs because she had spent 6 years learning everything there was to know about pediatric audiology. She made the appointment. She sat in the same audiologist's office where Marcus had first heard her voice. She watched her granddaughter put on a pair of hearing aids, simple ones this time, not surgically implanted, but just as life-changing. And when the audiologist switched them on, Jasmine's eyes went wide, exactly the way Marcus's had all those years ago. She turned to Ruthie Mee and said, "I can hear you, I can hear your voice." Ruthie Mee did not collapse into a chair this time. She stood up, wrapped her arms around both children, and whispered the words she had been saying for 6 years, the words that now held 2 names instead of one. "I love you, Marcus. I love you, Jasmine. I've got you both." Today, Ruthie Mee Coleman is 68 years old. She no longer works 3 jobs. The child support payments from Andre, garnished from whatever assets remained, cover the household expenses. She volunteers at Grandfamilies United, helping other grandmothers navigate the same system she once faced alone. Marcus is 10, thriving in school, able to hear and speak with a clarity that astonishes his teachers. Jasmine is 9, adjusting to the radical idea that someone will actually show up for her every single morning. They live in the same small house in North Baton Rouge, the one with the picture of Andre on the mantelpiece. Ruthie Mee kept it there, not as a monument to the son who failed, but as a reminder that the choice to stay is always within reach. For every person who walks away, there is someone who decides to double down, to work the extra shift, to scrub the floor, to give the blood, to open the door, to be the one who stays. Ruthie Mee Coleman is one woman in one small house in one corner of Louisiana, but her story echoes through every community in this country. There are millions of grandmothers raising grandchildren right now, working jobs that break their bodies, spending savings that were supposed to carry them through old age, showing up every single day for children who had no one else. They are invisible to the systems that should protect them. They are overlooked by the policies that should support them. But they are not invisible to the children whose lives they are saving. The question Ruthie Mee asked when she stood on that tarmac was whether she would lose the boy she had saved. She didn't lose him. She gained a granddaughter. She gained a community. She gained a legacy that will outlive any private jet, any bank account, any fleeting empire built on lies. The man who walked away lost everything. The woman who stayed built a family from the rubble of abandonment. So here is the question for you. Who in your life has stayed? Who has worked the extra shift, sacrificed the thing they needed, shown up without recognition or reward? And more importantly, how can you be that person for someone else? Not because you'll get a story written about you, but because being the one who stays is the most powerful thing any human being can do. If this story moved you, share it with someone who needs to know that their sacrifices are seen. Subscribe to this channel and turn on notifications so you never miss a story about ordinary people who do extraordinary things. And if you have a story like Ruthie Mee's, leave it in the comments below. We read them. We see you. You are not invisible. The woman who gave everything to let her grandson hear finally gave him something even more precious, a voice that no one could take away. And that voice is still speaking.